before we get into this is something that I had on the syllabus. It's relatively short, but what I want to introduce to you is the power of shame and how it works for us. And one of the concepts that is fairly common in at least the world of counseling and helping people is the fact that the things that we tend to do, I am very prone to ask the question a lot of, so how's that working for you? Well, most of the time when people I say that to them, they will inevitably say, oh, no, it doesn't work at all. The reality is it is, or you wouldn't keep doing it. And that's true for when it comes to shame. So there are 4 different things I want to bring to your attention, just to unpack this briefly and then get into it more. And that is what I call strategies of protection. And these are all guided by shame. And the 4 strategies are moving away, moving toward, moving against, and all the above. And the reality of how we go about managing our safety, because we say safety is more important to us than connection by the things that we actually do. So we will do one of these 3, or maybe the 4th one is the one that we all choose in one form or another in terms of moving away or moving toward people. Now, the thing that I want you to be mindful of is when I'm talking about these, this is still in light of the stained glass and how the stained glass works, because the stuff that holds the stained glass together is shame. If you take apart a stained glass a window of sorts, the thing that holds it and holds each piece in place is an extremely malleable but extremely dense metal called lead, shame. And really, if we're going to try to change this thing at all, we have to at least have enough heat to make that change. And that's part of what I want to get at in just a second. The question is how do these things work for us? Because they do. And how we actually go about doing them. So the first one is this. We move away and we isolate, even though it gives us the appearance it isolates us without the appearance of isolation. So remember, the stained glass is to create an appearance. A stained glass always tells a story. And the story can be one of connection, even though I'm still disconnected. I'm still away from people. There's still a barrier between me and them. And I can safely create this appearance of connection and still be isolated. And that's, in a sense, that is exactly the beauty of a stained glass. It tells the story of connection and the importance of relationships and love and all the other things that we say we value. But at the same time, it makes it possible for us to stay away, because the person behind the stained glass can always discount, can always dismiss, can always distort the things that somebody says on the other side of the glass. And in a lot of ways, the beauty of it is that they can still appear as if they're connected. That's the power. And that's exactly why we end up with a very beautiful stained glass, as you saw in the video. The more sophisticated it becomes, the more occluded it becomes, and the more able it is to actually keep people farther and farther away. So when we move away from people, it generally is a judgment that we have made about ourselves that then we find in what people say as only a confirmation of what we already know. In psychology, we refer to it as a confirmation bias. Whatever I believe to be true, I go out looking for evidence that it is, and inevitably I will find it. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here with this moving away. So it isolates without the appearance of isolation. The thing to also keep in mind when we're talking about it in terms of how it actually works is this fact of, it provides the means to move farther away without exposing oneself to further rejection. So again, the narrative allows us to move even farther away, and the other person doesn't even know it. So we could be very, very close up to the person, and the only thing that really separates us from them is the width of the glass. But when things are said and things are interpreted via the filters that we all have, which is essentially what a stained glass is in this case, is it ends up filtering the very words that people intend for us to be affirming and encouraging and supportive, and it filters it into, see, I told you all along, you can't measure up. And so we move farther and farther back into the dimness and the darkness, and we've already established, based on what Brene Brown has said, is that shame flourishes in darkness. And so the glass accomplishes that same end. The next one is moving toward, and this is the stained glass that reflects what others expect. Now, this one's a little bit different, and I got to move this because I keep seeing the back of your head, and I don't think you want your head to be in it. No, why are you saying sorry?
I don't know.
Should I lop off your head or something? Don't do that. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, the design, this one is unique because it's dynamic. See, the stained glass we talked about in the moving away really tells us tail, but that tail doesn't change. In this case, in this kind of stained glass, and this is stretching the metaphor, I know, but it changes according to what people around us expect of us. So we can reorient it, we can switch out various pieces of glass and values and attitudes or whatever else, because remember we talked about how in many cases these pieces of glass have rules of engagement. And we'll just switch them out according to need based on the people that are around us. There's always an invitation for closer relationship as long as it's within the parameters of the stained glass. So we set the limits of how somebody is to relate to us. We will adapt and change the pieces of glass to look the way we're expected to look, but there's still a separation. The person is still behind the glass. They still continue the commitment to self-protection and control. We're still trying to manage the other person's perceptions of us. So on the one hand, the moving away is I'm going to give an appearance that I'm here when I'm not, and moving toward is I'm going to give the appearance of intimacy when I'm not. And there's always some limits to what that interaction and what that relationship is actually going to look like as time goes along. The challenge, of course, is that when the other person begins to act outside of those parameters, usually that glass is going to turn into moving away. But the beauty of the stained glass really is I still have that separation, right? I can still just go deeper back in and leave the glass for how the person is going to look at it. Now, again, you've got to do the interpretation, because all of this description I'm giving you is stuff that is metaphorical of all the things that we tend to do. So the people that really want to make sure everybody's happy, they just simply will measure the crowd and figure out what the expectations are of the crowd, and then fill in the gaps to do it that way. One of the things that my kids hated, you ask, of all the roles that they hated the most, it was when I was a pastor, because being a pastor's kid, everybody is scrutinizing what you do, and they're very, very aware of that. And guess what? They do this. They look according to everybody's expectations. But the funny thing about it is, not only does shame grow in darkness, but resentment does too. And it does under these circumstances as well. So the moving toward is one way that we do it. The moving against is the third way, which really insulates against what others think. The thing that's true for a lot of these is that the person using the stained glass in the ways that I'm talking about generally assume that they know what others think. If I really wanted to know, I'd take a poll, but I'm not about to do that, because after all, somebody may not agree with me and then I'm wrong, or they're wrong, and they should just go away. But it assumes to know what others think, creates this appearance of remorse, regret, and compliance. Or, remember the other kind of glass I showed you? Not only the one that had colors in it, but the one that was very black and white. It was like, I dare you to try to get past this. So it manages the image in a way that effectively insulates from making any kind of authentic change. On the one hand, it's like, I don't care. On the other, I will do whatever you tell me to, but I'm not going to change. And this is the one thing that I tend to say a lot, that we don't think a lot think a lot about in terms of shame. And that is, it not only isolates us, but it insulates us from change. And it insulates us from feedback. It insulates us from a lot of things. Generally, with this moving against sort of glass and motive, is that I will give you what you want, regret, remorse, compliance, whatever that is, but I will stay safely back here and I will do whatever I damn well please. So it creates an image to look, and nothing about it matches the interior of it. The one thing that's interesting to think about when we're talking about the stained glass is that the appearance on the outside does not match the appearance on the inside. And the question is kind of twofold. One is, what am I showing? And two is, what am I looking at? Because in most cases, they don't match. So all of the above is adapting according to whatever the needs are, moving against people when they won't buy whatever it is I'm trying to sell, or just moving away from people just to stay as safe as I possibly can. So the thing to keep in mind is that shame holds this thing all together. Shame, I said, these are strategies of protection guided by shame. And shame, by its very nature, is a condemnation of my identity. So if that's what's going to hold it all together, then everything is in service then to that as well. So, as I said, it isolates, insulates, and images whatever we aspire to be. And the engine is shame, and the fuel is fear. Fear of disconnection, fear of blame, fear of whatever other people will assume or conclude, whatever it might be. Is the backdrop to this. The one thing I want you to keep in mind is the only way this works is whether or not I am willing to conform to it. And that's the beginning of change. But grace is the only thing that will give us a space for us to actually try something differently. Shame will never create a space to do that, ever. So if you're feeling paralyzed or stunted, or you can't get anywhere, you feel stuck, it isn't because grace is being held out to you, it's because you're overrun with shame. Because its tendency is to paralyze us. I have mentioned in other classes the 2 Corinthians 7 passage where Paul's talking about, kind of reflecting on the letters that he wrote to the Corinthian church. And needless to say, a lot of times I have heard the Corinthian church be called, instead of girls gone wild, church gone wild. And Paul literally just throws the book at them and reads them the riot act about their behavior. There is a second letter, which we don't know what happened to. The third letter is actually 2 Corinthians. So there's a lot of time that has passed since Paul has written, this letter to the second letter to the Corinthians. And he's basically saying in chapter 7, he says, look, I know I wrote you something that was really hurtful. Really hurtful. I know that it hurt you. But it was based on that led to godly sorrow that led to life. And then he makes a distinction that I think is profound in light of what we're talking about here. And he said, but worldly sorrow leads to death. Worldly sorrow is shame. Shame leads to death, an inability to respond to invitations of connectedness, an invitation to growth we can't respond to. And that's exactly what shame does. So we've got to put these things all within context. And one way that I like to think about it is in terms of communities. Because we are never an isolated individual. We are always in a context of some sort. And we always will be. And we've got to recognize that we are in a context that encourages us to maintain the stained glass that we have. As a matter of fact, there is sometimes a silent collusion in our culture, even in the Christian culture, that I won't show you behind my stained glass if you don't ask me to show you mine. And so there are 3 different communities we're in. Messages from family, friends, and self is the very beginning. And we're giving ourselves messages all the time. Family can be the kinds of messages we get with whether to be a good little boy or a good little girl, or about being ashamed of yourself, or just a sigh. It doesn't even have to be a word. Somebody can look sideways when you say something and you're already feeling the shame because they're not willing to even look at you because of who you are. So family, friends, at some level, you guys have been noticing this in your own language with each other and how easy it is to get trapped into shame-based language, not freedom-based or grace-based language that gives people the freedom to choose. And it's not about identity, it's about behavior and the things that we have to do. So you have that, you have messages from teachers, colleagues, peers, church leaders, members, mentors, health professionals, all of that. That is the larger group. And before too long, you add in media and television and marketing and advertising and books and music. And we are now thoroughly saturated with the idea that the only way to remain safe is to have a good stained glass. And that's the context in which we're operating. We have to be mindful of that. We're not entirely going to get away from it. We can create communities of people that stand against this. We can. But the reality is you cannot make people be part of community. You can invite them. And if you invite them, then they're allowed to say no. Just like God's invitation to us. We're allowed to say no. But we're also allowed to say yes, which means that yes is even more important. That's the beauty of freedom, really. So, what I have for you to do, and you don't have to do it now, but I have a couple of things I want you to add to your project at the end of the semester. That good, huh, Emily? And it starts with this, is what I want you to recognize is that our stained glass actually contains within it what you might call unwanted identities. And your job is to begin to identify the unwanted identities you're walking around with. So, your first handout to be included will make it easier for you. Let's keep sending it all back. Is these stems. These stems are here to help you do the next assignment that will be part of your project. And that is this. Get it all nice, build up the anticipation. It is this. You get to make your own stained glass.
You should see the one I made of human sexuality.
I can only imagine. Well, no, I can't. I'll contain my imagination. So, no, off of this shape.
Off of that shape?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to you.
Oh, okay. I don't know if we could choose whatever shape we want.
I'd prefer you to use this shape. You suppose for a purpose? So, and this is what I want you to do, okay? Take two of each of these. One will be the outside, and the other will be the inside. Outside is what people see. The inside is what only you see. Merry Christmas. You have the rest of the semester to work on it. You can use whatever creativity and colors you want to use, but this is to be part of your final project.
So you just want us to like turn this in with?
Yeah, yeah. So turn this in with. You can keep the stems. I don't care about the stems, but turn in your heart-shaped stained glass. And that will be part of your project at the end. Okay? We okay, Rachel? It's all good. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that, right? Identify what's on the outside, identify what's on the inside, and what you look at and think about all the time. No? No? Oh.
My question. She's like, no, good.
Nope. Nope. Yes, ma'am.
So we'll have this project, will we have a final exam essays?
No, that's all the project, the list of questions for you to answer in that project plus this. That's it. There's no final. Everybody heard me, right? There is no final.
Can I get it?
No. I did write it in the syllabus. We really want to get into this fight. The midterm is in the syllabus. Okay. Are we done? I have more. Much more. Sadistic? Oh my goodness. I've never been called that. All right. Yes, ma'am. No. One side. You needed two, Lauren. Is there any extra hearts out here? You can have your heart. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right. I won't take you any place I haven't visited.
Have you done this?
I've done it. Okay. So this is where we're heading. What does it mean to pursue being pure glass people in redeeming relationships? Yes.
Do you have any more?
There's some back there.
I don't know where they went.
Oh, Rachel took some. Is that the end of them?
That way. I don't know if there's enough. Oh, looks like there's 2 1 heart. I know.
Oh, no. No. Are we out? Yeah.
Are they just like characteristics, like one word?
It's whatever you want.
I don't like this.
Yeah. Do we have any extra? This is really hilarious. Do we have any extra hearts? No, I'll put a stack out by my office. You can get more. Yeah. Yeah.
Have the other side.
Beg your pardon?
Have the other side cross to it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the question we have to get to is, what does it mean to develop into a pure glass person or people? If we want to develop the kind of communities you guys say you long for, that means moving toward pure glass, being known as we are, not as we should be. Because the stained glass is all about what we should be. So the challenge, and remember, I mean, when I showed you the timeline of talking about the stained glass, there's some point in time a crisis occurs and somebody veers off course and gets to the kind of crisis that's necessary to create this pure glass. And what resulted is glass indeed, but glass with a blind. Because people can look in any time if I don't have a blind, but I have the controls over what I show people and what I don't. And that's appropriate boundaries, which we'll talk more about, but it's all very much a part of the conversation that we have to have. Taylor, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah, just about the stained glass stuff.
Yeah.
So in your talk class or whatever that we watched, it only goes till the fire, basically.
Right.
So the stained glass cells, okay, I see that's what we're kind of going into now, but I'm just wondering, so there's two courses that you can take,
Right.
and there's one that's,
Continuing the path of the stained glass.
but that's just the same.
It's the same, just more sophisticated. Right. Yeah, I mean, the next stage after adolescence, when a lot of this stuff begins to occur, is the stage of isolation versus intimacy. And that's part of Erikson's, ironically, it's ironic to me that Erikson actually conceptualized it that way. That out of the role confusion and identity, the next stage after was intimacy versus isolation. And that's where the things tend to veer a little bit more off course. So we're looking at a path that takes us toward pure glass. So, but what does it mean? And what I want to show you in this whole section that we're going to be walking through is the kind of the pieces that are part of becoming this kind of people. And so it's littered with film clips that teach you something that I can't teach you in words alone. And that's what I have here to talk about and look at. Is I have a scene out of a movie. Some of you guys have seen this in other contexts. I think this is even more important in this context. But it's a scene out of a movie that I want to talk about on the backside. It's a movie that probably most of you have seen. And if you've been in the other classes where I've talked about the 6 dimensions, you will have seen this, and this will look familiar. But in this context, it looks a little bit different, and we'll talk a little bit about it after this is all over. So here is the clip. Whoops.
God love you, William. So do I.
No! Stick fast! Or I will fall you!
As Jesus Christ the Nazarene,
And His most holy mother, the Virgin Mary, are my witnesses! I will fold you! I will rip your fist and blind! Stigmatize your sister! Pain! Lots of pain!
We're in trouble.
Listen to me! Listen to me!
What a pair we made. Both trying to hide who we are. Both unable to do so. Your men love you. If I knew nothing else about you, that would be enough. But you also tilt when you should withdraw. And that is knightly too. Release him.
May appear to be of humble origins, but my personal historians have discovered that he is descendant from an ancient royal line. This is my word, and as such is beyond contestation. Now, if I may repay the kindness you once showed me, take a knee. By the power vested in me by my father, King Edward, and by all the witnesses here, I dub thee Sir William. Arise, Sir William. Joust. What? A tournament to finish? Now, are you fit to compete, or shall the forfeit stand? No, I'm fit. I shall have your opponent informed of it. You will embrace Shield on the lists at once.
Now, why do I show you this? You know, on occasion, Hollywood has a way of stumbling onto something bigger than it knows. The backstory, how many of you guys have seen this movie? A few people have. It's called A Knight's Tale. And the backstory is Will is basically a pauper. He was a knave, I think it would be, falling into to a particular knight. And while he was serving his knight, he was a page boy basically. And while he was serving his knight that was in a jousting contest and basically got hurt so badly he was killed. And so Will gets the brainy idea with his friends that he's going to put on the knight's armor and joust instead. And he goes on to win the battle. They fight, and he practices and gets help and all sorts of things. He's surrounded by this group that you see here. And he works his way. It's kind of like, the NCAA tournament almost. He works his way up from the lowest rounds and basically comes against the greatest jouster in the kingdom, who's a soldier, basically, a professional soldier. And this guy comes back and he's winning all the tournaments and he's up against Will. And in his run up through the tournament, he faces an opponent who he doesn't know who it is. And before too long, whispers start coming to him saying, that's the Black Prince of Wales. You need to give up. You need to just, withdraw. And he said, not a chance. And so basically he jousts with the Black Prince of Wales and doesn't win, but still jousts. And the Black Prince comes by him and says, well done, whatever, and goes on about his business. Well, he gets to London and goes into this major tournament, and his opponent finds out that he goes to his father's house, who is a thatcher. And the guy is going blind, and his opponent follows him to the slums of London while he climbs up into his father's hovel of a place to visit his father, and he realizes this kid is nothing. He's not even a knight. And so he catches him and throws him in stocks. What you have happening here is the Black Prince of Wales appearing and doing something that is really very remarkable in terms of just being in redeeming relationships. And this is some example. Because the one thing that Will cannot get rid of or get away from is his shame is publicly exposed in stocks. You can't get away. People throw stuff at you, and rotten tomatoes and rotten fruit and all sorts of things just for the entertainment of it all. But the thing I want you to notice is that Will is recognized not for his lineage, but for his personal qualities. As a matter of fact, this is where the biblical proportions begin to explode on us. A prince looks at a pauper and proclaims them of an ancient royal line and invites them into the kingdom by becoming a knight. And he does it based on qualities, personal qualities, not based on his lineage. It was who he had cultivated himself to be. There's some remarkable things in there. If you heard Roland next to him say, Will is saying, just let them have me. And he said, God love you, Will, and I do too. And the knight didn't miss that point, because he said a number of things. Both are trying to hide who we are, but both unable to do so. Think about what happened with Jesus when he went into Israel for the first time. Trying to hide who he was. He would silence demons and say, don't tell anybody who I am. Unable to do so. Eventually people find out. Your men love you. If nothing else about you, that would be enough. Enough for what? To be proclaimed royal. You tilt when you should withdraw. I told you that story. That is knightly too. He is descended from an ancient royal line. Now, if I may pay the kindness you once showed me. Think of how Jesus described people in prison, people poor. If you do something of kindness to them, you're doing what to me? You're doing that same thing to me. See, the proportions here are just phenomenal. And they weren't trying to do that at all. But I think in a lot of ways, our spiritual DNA begins to resonate when we see themes like this, because it's embedded in us. And this is the stuff of being pure glass people. I can't resonate with another if I can't see them and know them. I can't. And crashing down the wall is not going to do it. So, what does it take to allow this crisis, the crisis that we've been talking about, to refine us? It's a commitment to cultivation, not a commitment to production. It's balancing grace and truth. And it also is confronting shame. That should sound vaguely familiar because you've just spent about 7.5 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, doing exactly that. Is we've been spending our time trying to unmask the shame within us and the things that we have allowed to define who we are, identity, and begin to develop some kind of a vision for where we're heading. In a lot of cases, when people that I might ask, I said, what do you want? And more often than not, guess what people say? I don't know. And usually my snarky comment is, if you shoot for nothing, you're sure to hit it. So we have to develop some kind of vision for where we're heading and what kind of journey we're actually on. And that's leveraging this crisis to refine us. And remember what we talked about when we were talking about this is the shattering of the stained glass is caused by a crisis. There is always fire. Fire is something that comes into our lives, causes us to do something very biblical, rethink. I mean, something even bigger than that, because John was in the wilderness calling people to repent, and Jesus was too. Repent is not only rethink, but it's also redirect. There are two words across Scripture that talk about repentance. It is to change one's mind, metanoia, and to change one's direction, return home, teshuva. Those are the two major words in Scripture used for repentance. So that crisis potentially gives us an opportunity to rethink and redirect. And we can just stop with rethinking, but that doesn't lead anywhere. I can sit still and wax profound about nothing. But I can rethink and start down a different direction, and I certainly find out about a lot more because I choose to move. Now, if I'm run over with shame, I won't choose to move because I'm afraid of going in the wrong direction, assuming that there is a right one. I said to you at the beginning of this class that transformation requires freedom and trust. Reformation requires neither. So we have to rethink everything. We have to spend some time looking within in terms of self-reflection, and then spending the time to get some feedback from safe people, not from anybody. The people that are equally devoted to your growth as you are of your own, are really starters in terms of the safe people in our lives. So it's this commitment to a wholehearted self. We had that with Brene Brown, a clear glass self. Integrity doesn't always mean being and doing the right thing. It means being integrated, which is what glass is. Stained glass is the epitome of disintegration. It's the picture of disintegration. And yet, we have stained glass that we say, my, oh my, how pretty that is. And ironically, we do that with each other. My, oh my, how pretty you are at managing to keep everybody outside and not know anything on the inside. Developing a Me Too personal posture rather than a you should stance. This is the beginning of a kind of community that we can actually be known in safely. And it's not a utopia. I'm not trying to describe something that isn't possible. But the challenge is that developing a community like this, are we willing to tolerate not getting it right initially? Because either I try or I don't try. If I try, I might not get it right. That's true. But if I have grace kind of in my back pocket, I will say, okay, maybe I can try it another way and it'll work differently next time. On the other hand, if I do it wrong, I'm doomed with shame. I will never find my way out of that hole. So, what are the main characteristics of such people? That's what I want to look at. And the thing that I want you to begin to focus on is something that I've used as a way of remembering it, and it's a pyramid. The Egyptian pyramids had, interestingly enough, had their temple on the interior where nobody could get to it. But South American pyramids always had a temple at the top with stairways leading up to it. And a pyramid is probably the most enduring structure that we have in the world today. They've stood the test of time, and that's what we're ultimately going to build on. So there are 6 areas that I want us to focus on in this pyramid, and they're constructed in such a way that they build on one another, literally. As a matter of fact, wherever we land at the end can't be achieved without the other things. So it looks a little bit like this. The base of the pyramid is truth and reality. We'll spend time talking about each one of these things. The next level up is what we do with control and how we manage it. Clearly, the commitment to being a stained glass is a commitment to controlling people's perceptions, irrespective of the fact that I have no control over it. But we still need to try. The next level up is boundaries, and what we do in understanding me and not me. Now, we've talked a little bit about this in this class already, but there's a lot more that I want to introduce you to so that you have a deeper understanding about why boundaries are such a big deal. The next level up is forgiveness and reconciliation, and what we do within it. That contains what I just mentioned to you in terms of the idea of repentance and forgiveness and reconciliation. After that is conflict. And just like the pyramid in the South American pyramids, at the upper level, at the top level, is intimacy. Now, intimacy, for a lot of people that get into relationships, a lot of times they turn this pyramid upside down and start there, and then they wonder why the whole thing falls apart. They don't take the time to set foundations in place in order for it to build upon one another. So, we start with truth. And the question is what does truth got to do with it? Now, keeping in mind what we just saw, as far as the clip from A Knight's Tale, a pauper who passes himself off as a royalty. Here's another scene out of another movie that I'm sure you've all seen that is equally as powerful because of who plays in it and how they go about casting themselves. I guess these are auto.
I believe my eyes. Why have you come back?
Please, sir, we've done what you told us. We brought you the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. We melted her.
Oh, you liquidated her, eh? Very resourceful.
So we'd like you to keep your promise to us, if you please, sir.
Not so fast. Not so fast. I'll have to give the matter a little thought.
Where'd my sound go?
Oh, but I want to go home now.
You've had plenty of time already.
Yeah. Do not oppose the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you are really great and powerful, you'll keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
Now, again, it's fascinating to unpack some of these clips like this because, you know, the smallest member of the cast has the biggest role to play. And then we have the immortal words, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. We would change it for this class. Don't pay attention to the person behind the stained glass. And the Wizard of Oz says, I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard. And there's again so much about this because he thought when he landed in Oz that him being just a professor that knows just a few things was not good enough. And so he cast himself as the great and powerful Wizard of Oz. And he is unmasked by the smallest things. The smallest things are the very things that oftentimes unmask us and unmask the stained glass window. So there's a lot that I have talked about. You guys have gotten drilled into you about the difference between big T and little t truth. Big T truth is the idea that I came across, began putting this thing together, was big T truth and little t truth are not, one is not better than another. This altogether is a description of how we see life. And big T truth is the truths in our lives that fit in with biblical understanding of the reality we live in, who we are, who God is, what reality is. The thing to keep in mind is that this kind of truth, this big T truth, is universal. It is applicable to everybody. And that's a fundamental piece of who we are. We have to have some way of knowing where we stand. And it is a unmoving, immovable reference point. When God says that I am his son and you are his daughter, that is big T truth. It is fundamentally true. And he has called us sons and daughters of the King, and that is true. Those things are all true. The reality behind big T truth is applicable to everybody. The other kind of truth that we talk about, and again, this is just a superficial division. Don't think that this is somehow bigger than life or something better than anything else. It isn't. But the second one is little t truth, and this is the reality of who we are. It includes everything about us, our dreams, our thoughts, our attitudes, our conclusions, our values, our confusion and fear and all the emotions that we have. This is our experiential truth. It defines us. It allows us to be unique in the context of others. This truth is unique to us. Big T truth is universal. Little t truth is unique to us. So, this is the truth that defines us, and this includes both guilt and shame. Remember, we're talking about shame being about identity. This is little t truth. So when somebody says, I'm an idiot, I can't ever seem to get anything right, and you say back, just remember, you're a child of God, you're using a big T truth against a little t reality. And the one thing that you guys have heard me say, and I'll just say it again for everybody's benefit, a big T truth that is poorly timed is experienced by the person you use it on as a weapon. It's a weapon. It wounds and crushes and separates and invites people to run behind their stained glass because it's safer in there, because whoever I hang out with just keeps telling me this stuff that I know is true. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, but what's really true is what I conclude about me. And that's the basis on which we relate to one another. So, how do these things interact? they interact this way. Is that the way that I understand it is that big T truth is the vertical of the cross. It anchors us into things that are unmovable, that are true, they're immutable, they don't change. All of those things are part of that big T reality. The little t is my world, my conclusions, the things that are unique to me. And I would suggest to you, and again, this is coming nowhere but the twisted world inside my brain, is that the abundant life is lived at the intersection of those two things. It's what I refer to as the messy middle. Because it takes trust, and it takes freedom, and it takes a lot of hanging on with other people to do this at all. Not well, just at all. Because there is gray areas here. This is ambiguity, this is confusion, this is uncertainty. Am I doing it right? Am I not? And it's a fundamental piece of this interaction between big T truth and little t truth. And like I said, all of this together is describing all of our world, not just part of it. That's the key to remember. Now, there are two other dimensions that we need to talk about when we're talking about truth. First of all is the idea of living in the truth and living with the truth. Living in the truth, I would point you to Psalm 15. It's probably one of the shortest psalms in all of the psalms, but it's remarkable because it talks about who may abide in your tent with you, God. Who may abide in your holy hill? He who walks with integrity, works righteousness, and speaks truth in his heart. Now, take those apart for a second before we go any further. Walks with integrity. What did we just say was integrity? Pure glass. Knowing and being known. He who resides with you is able to be known and knows you. Works righteousness is kind of a misnomer when you really come right down to it, because it's not about works that I do for righteousness, but works to be rightly related with you is what righteousness means. It's not about perfection. It's not about being better than everybody else. It's talking about, so I am somebody who walks with integrity, who is known and can be known, and who is rightly related to God and those around them. And finally, speaks truth in his heart. So living in the truth is choosing to reside within this kind of truth. And notice, 2 out of these 3 things are all relational. They're relational. Walks with integrity is relational in terms of being known and knowing others. Works righteousness is about rightly related. And speaking truth in his heart is the one thing that anchors the person that we're talking about. But it's not all, okay? So it's works living in the truth. The second thing is it's living with the truth. Living with the truth. Living with the truth as it is, not as I would have it to be. Let me show you something that will make that point. Accept one another as Christ has accepted you, Romans 15. He puts in this context. You are strong, being considerate of those who are sensitive about things like this. We must not please ourselves. We should help others and do what is right and build them up. Therefore, sometimes we miss this point. This is the outgrowth of that. Accepting one another, each other, as Christ has accepted you, so that God will be given the glory. Living with the truth is living with the truth of me and living with the truth of you. It's being considerate of others and not doing it just to look good. See, Paul is describing the nature of a relationship that leads naturally to acceptance. Naturally to acceptance. So living in the truth and living with the truth. Let me show you. How many of you guys know the Serenity Prayer? Anybody know it well enough to quote it? Nope. Some of you guys, I don't think any of you. I haven't had anybody in addictions in here, have I? Oh, Maddie, that reaching, and McKenna. Okay, reaching back a little ways. Well, you guys will recognize this, but what I want to show you is the Serenity Prayer. Most of what is quoted in the Serenity Prayer is the first 4 lines. The rest of it is pure gold that nobody ever knows anything about. It looks like this: grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Period. That's it. That's all that AA ever talks about. But look at the rest: living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, so I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. That right there is a remarkable statement. That Jesus accepted the world as it was, not as he would have it, because that was gone in the Garden of Eden. That was gone. He accepted it as it was, and that was the motivation for God to send him in the first place. It's something that I've said. Some of you guys heard at the senior thing, and that is God accepts your humanity a whole lot more than you do. You know why I can say that? Because he sent Jesus. He knew it needed redeemed. We live the rest of our lives rejecting our humanity, thinking that that's the only path to purity or to connectedness. So, let me end with this quote from a friend of mine, Brennan Manning. You'll be reading this when you get to Ragamuffin Gospel. Once we accept the gospel of grace and seek to shed defense mechanisms and disguises, honesty becomes both more difficult and more important. Now, honesty involves the willingness to face the truth of who we are, regardless of how threatening or unpleasant our perceptions may be. It means hanging in there with ourselves, otherwise known as grace, and with God, learning our mind tricks by experiencing how they defeat us, recognizing our avoidances, acknowledging our lapses, learning completely that we cannot handle it ourselves. This steady self-confrontation requires strength and courage. We cannot use failure as an excuse for not trying. Brennan was the poster boy for that quote. There were so many times that he failed. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for grace, Brennan would never have had the impact he had on my life or millions of other people in the books that he's written. I'm sure of it. And the first one to be absolutely fundamentally shocked that he has any impact on anyone at all was Brennan Manning. He was stunned. He just continued to be stunned. We had a conference at Flatirons many, many years ago that Brennan came and spoke. And we had 1,500 people show up from 6 different states just to show up to hear him. And I took him back to the hotel, and he said, where did all those people come from? It's like, what'd you expect, dude? And it's like, no, I still don't get it. Every time I do one of these and people shows up, I'm still surprised. Because guess what he looked at? He looked at all of his failures. But then he applied grace and just did, you put him up in front of people, and he became the person that we knew as Brennan Manning. He would say stuff, and you know, Saxby likens it to a gut punch. You know, he'd just clobber somebody over the head with all the love and grace that he could muster, and then come alongside of them and listen. And I've been to conferences where Brennan's been there, and there have been lots and lots of people, and he has literally stood for hours listening to people and just listening to their stories. And I don't know where he gets the stamina. I really didn't, because he was pretty frail in his later years, and yet he seemed to have legs of steel to be able to stand and talk to people and hear from them. And that was Brennan. That was Brennan. So we will end on that point, and we will jump into the next one next time. See ya.